Okay, I thought I'd make a quick build log to go through some of the things that I've gone into this build so far. Now, if we start with the components, that's a NEC Spark 2. I decided to go for this one over the Nano Biscotti because I felt that the features were more along the lines of what I was looking for. So we've got some accent LEDs that are blinking away there. We've got 3mm blue, green and red on the underside. Now they're all soldered to the positives soldered to this little PCB bit that I've got on here. So I attached that myself and I soldered across all of that. That was an idea from somebody on Facebook who's been helping me quite a bit with this build, so a big shout out to Songwhat. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Now that's stuck onto the micro SD metal pad with some 3M mounting tape, so it's not going to short out or anything like that. I just thought it's easier to mount it there rather than having all of the positives on the single pad on the board. Now, the reason they are rigid in that way is because I used at least one of the legs off the LED itself, so they're fairly sturdy as long as you bend them in the right direction. The end of the leg is soldered into the negative on the accent pad. It looks like one of them is free there, number 3. It's down there, but actually it's soldered on the underside. That's where the red LED's soldered underneath, so that's the third accent LED. Now they've stopped blinking now, and that's one of the problems with wiring it this way. It's I've just connected everything to test it, but the positive sometimes comes off, and as you can see there, one of the aux wires has come off as well. So be very, very careful if you decide to go this route, because you could short out your battery. But I'm a bit impatient and I couldn't wait, so it's a bit of an occupational hazard. Yeah, so I've got the Graflex 2.1 here, slightly different to the 2.0. I've got some retention screws here, I believe they're 832, and a lot of this was aided by the excuse me, the video series of made by Matthew Dudley called Let's Build a Graflex, and it's probably one of the best videos to watch if you're going to start out in this game. That's a Graflex clamp switch holder. I've got 2 switches there, I forget what sizes they are, but the switch holder itself comes from a chap called Dimitri Stock, I believe his name is, or Stock. He sells on Shapeways and is a very, very, very good alternative to mounting an aux switch rather than having it up here. I believe it's there somewhere, because you'd have to drill that out and it becomes a bit labour intensive. And plus this one makes use of the actual clamp itself. So you'll notice that I've connected both switches together, so either of them activate the aux feature. Now the wiring comes underneath this little section here, so when I do connect that onto the clamp, I'd have to screw this in last, because otherwise, you know, I can't push that into the over this because the wires are in the way. But it's the only way I found of doing this properly. Now there you'll notice I've got a fairly big speaker. It's a 27mm Railmaster bass speaker. The chassis recommends, or got 3D recommend, that you use a 28mm speaker in there. Now he's written his instructions based off a Vico speaker, but I decided to go for a Railmaster because Nigon, who makes this board, said that those are well, they work very, very well with this board. As a result, it's a bit wider than the speaker that Goth3D recommends, so I had to cut out or Dremel out both sides of this a little bit, and even then it was a very tight fit, so it took a bit of butchering, and you can see the damage there. But all in all, I've finally got it in, and it does seem to work, and it sounds pretty good. Now all the wiring, I've straightened it out just above here carefully, and I've fed it through, and they're all twisted here. Now at the end here I'm going to have a section of the crystal chamber, which is actually this part here, and that big hole there is where the wire is going to go through. And the reason this isn't on at the minute is because I didn't like the 3D print lines that come with it. It's stainless steel, and I opted for a rhodium plated version instead, so it matches nicely with these gold plated other crystal chamber parts. So although I've had a go at grinding and sanding these 3D printed bits, and I've had some success, as you can see here. That's what it did look like. Let me see, focus a little bit. Yeah, that's what it did look like, and this is what it looks like after grinding. That's not been sanded yet, but I'm going to aim to do that with all the stainless steel chassis parts. The reason I'm not going to do that with this is because it's got too many small little fiddly bits that I don't think I've got the tools to sand properly to get to any level of effect that I wanted. Oops. And that's what happens when you have loose wire just hanging around. I believe the positive just touched the pad a little bit, and it's on. It'll probably disconnect in a minute. It's very, very fiddly, so again, just be careful if you go this route. And that about does it, I think. I decided to use a red button switch. That's stuck to the switch pad with some 3M mounting tape. Again, some great advice from Songwood. Oops. Got a bit ahead of myself there. If you want to see how this lights up, you can check one of my other videos. But the other thing was, I had a very tricky experience with the Solar's whole battery that came in here, that has gone into here. It's an 18650 battery. Now, it's the same size as this one that I got from KR Sabers. This I'm using as a test battery, but the Solar's Hold one comes pre-wired, so you'll notice these two wires that I've attached to the holder are extra, but on the Solar's Hold one it comes attached onto the battery. The problem I had is those wires are 24 gauge and they're far too thick for this chassis, so I needed to either adapt or snip those wires part way and then solder on some thinner wires, and I'm using 30 gauge in my build as recommended by God3D, and I thought that it wasn't really working too well if I went down that route, and when I actually cut one of the negative wires off the Solar's Hold, the sleeving just slid right off the entire wire. So as a result, something happened to it and it just stopped working. So I ordered some 18650 heat shrink off eBay, and I stripped the Solar's Hold heat shrink. So all this green part here is heat shrink protecting the protected battery. You've got a circuit board at the top and bottom, I believe. So if you're ever going to open one of those, be very careful. And I stuck on desoldered the wires that were on there, and I resoldered some 30 gauge wire, some fresh wire, and I bought some, as I said, I bought some heat shrink, so I just placed that over the battery and I used a heat gun to gently heat it, and it's as good as new. So I can't show you that because it's hidden inside here, but everything's wired up and it seems to be working, as you realised from probably a minute ago when it was lighting up. So that's about it, I think. Yeah, big shout out to all those people who've helped me on my build so far. Songwood's been an amazing help with all the little tips and tricks that you can use. And just carefully get the positive out of the way there, because I think it was very close to the negative. Anyway, KR Sabers have been really good. Cal's very, very helpful, and any advice I've needed with his products and building this using his products, he's been a great asset. I initially messed up one of the Tricree LEDs that's inside there, and you can't tell, but that's my second Tricree. My first one was damaged, and I had to just use it as solder practice, really. This is the first major soldering project that I've taken on, so I've had to learn quite a bit in the last month or so, and I think it's coming out quite well. And a big shout out to the community, because we get a lot of people on the Graflex Addicts group and the Vault group on Facebook and Elite Lightsaber Society, I believe. Everyone there has been really helpful, and they've contributed to this in some way. So yeah, there it is. That's everything for now, and when I get on with this and I get my rhodium plated chassis part come through, I'll connect that up and I'll probably make another video once everything's soldered, and it's going to be about this long, I reckon. And I think finally at the end I'm going to grind and sand these, because this takes ages. This little bit here took me probably the best part of 20 minutes just to grind, and that's with a carbide rotary disc there that I'm using with my Proxon. And yeah, I think the lowest setting on the Proxon is 5,000 RPM, so again I had to be quite careful and quite patient. Normally you do that at something like 1,000 RPM, I believe. But yeah, all in all, this is where I am, and it's turning out great. Thanks for listening.